You know that feeling that you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and your brain is just turned on? Then you have the guilt and the worry and the mental spiral that won't quit until the alarm goes off. And then somehow you have to function like a normal human being for the rest of the day. Yeah, that's what we're talking about today in our episode. I have been so looking forward to this conversation because sleep is one of those gray areas that so many of us are tolerating way longer than we should. And I'm talking about bad sleep. We think that we're fine. We think that we're functioning. But listen, there is a difference between functioning and actually performing at your absolute best. And today's guest is going to make that distinction very clear for us. My guest today is Morgan Adams. Morgan is a holistic sleep coach that has made her life's work to help people not just sleep better, but completely transform their relationship with sleep. And I want you to hear her story for a moment because, wow, it matters and it makes sense on why she does what she does today. Morgan has spent almost a decade dependent on sleeping pills. She found her way out of that. And when she did, then something else happened. She was then faced with breast cancer, not once, but twice. And instead of letting any of that slow her down, she channeled all of that into helping other people reclaim something most of us take completely for granted, a good night's sleep. She's the real deal. And this conversation is packed with value for you today. So here's what we're covering. This is what you get to look forward to. Stick around all the way to the end. We're covering why the biggest sleep myths that adults have over 50 still believe, especially the ones who think that they're fine because they make it through the day. We're also covering what alcohol is actually doing to your sleep and why that 3 a.m. wake up might not be a mystery at all. We also discuss why the identity labels that we carry, like I'm a light sleeper, I've always been this way, I'm just a night owl, might be keeping you stuck in a sleep pattern that isn't actually yours. What couples can do when one partner's snoring is wrecking everyone else's in the house without defaulting to separate bedrooms. We're also sharing the tools and gadgets that Morgan personally swears by and the ones that might actually be making your sleep worse. And her answer to my favorite question of all, what gray area around sleep are people tolerating way too long and what it's actually costing them? This one is going to hit home for a lot of people, and I truly hope that it helps you today. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to Beyond the Gray, the podcast about gray area drinking and how it impacts your health, relationships, purpose, and faith. This is where we have real conversations about the topics successful men over 50 don't usually talk about out loud. If you've built a great life but keep asking, is this it? You're not alone. When alcohol becomes your go-to off switch and your marriage, health, or purpose feel disconnected, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Kari Schwear, and this, my friend, is where the gray ends. Welcome back to Beyond the Gray. I'm Kari, and today we're doing something that we have not yet done on this podcast. I have my very first guest, who happens to be a very good friend of mine. She is someone whose work sits right at the intersection of everything that we talk about here: our body, our health, our daily performance, and the habits that are either serving us or costing us, no matter if you're aware of it or not. So today, please help me welcome Morgan Adams. Thank you for being here, Morgan. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and being your first guest. That's really exciting.
I know. I'm so excited. And I shared your intro in the beginning of this call. I do want to jump right into your story a little bit because you mentioned that you were dependent on prescription sleeping pills for quite some time. And I want to hear a little bit about, is that how you became or wanted to become a sleep coach and get into that? Was that your inspiration?
Indirectly, yeah. So it's a little bit of a windy story, but I did have insomnia like 20 years ago, and I was dependent on Ambien for 8 years. And I did manage to get off of it pretty well without any major drama, and slept pretty well for a long time. And then the pandemic hit, and my sleep started to get disrupted again. And so I began to research sleep in a real way, and started understanding a little bit more about what I needed to do to correct the sleep, because I didn't want to go back to taking the sleeping pills. And that really sort of sparked me into this whole, what would it look like for me to actually help other people with their sleep? And I had just kind of 2 years before that been diagnosed with breast cancer, and that created a situation where I felt like I wanted to help women with their health, but I wasn't sure how that would translate. And then this whole sleep thing came up in 2020, and I was like, I really want to actually make this a thing. So it was sort of a hodgepodge of different events, but it all kind of culminated in 2021. Really is when I launched this sleep coaching business and made it official. So I help adults who have issues sleeping, mainly insomnia, but some people come to me because they want to optimize their sleep.
Yes, I will tell you, I refer so many people over to your Instagram,
Thank
and
you.
you are so good at doing content and full of so much good advice and all the gadgets and all the things. We're going to cover quite a bit today on that, because I know a lot of people have tried so many things when they struggle with sleep. So I want to start by asking you first, what do you think are the biggest sleep myths that adults, especially over 50, because a lot of the listeners are our age, Morgan, they're over 50.
Yeah.
Not that we're old, but we are at that midlife place. What do they still believe that they maybe don't even understand the importance of their sleep, because they say that they're fine and they function well and they go through their day? What are they actually missing,
Yeah.
do you think?
Well, I think a lot of times people who are older will sometimes cling on to this myth that people who are past a certain age need less sleep. And that's not actually true. We still, as we get older, we need the, 7 to 9 hours as recommended by the National Sleep Foundation. But our sleep does become a bit more light and fragmented. The sleep architecture changes, but we still do need about the same amount. So that's one myth that I think that a lot of people haven't quite gotten straight yet. And then you touched on this whole, I'm fine, kind of like I function fine. And I think a lot of people, especially if they are professionals, really very involved with their careers, maybe they're entrepreneurs, they will sometimes sacrifice their own sleep at the expense, because they want to be up late working. And what often happens is that they are chronically riding with some degree of sleep deprivation. And they've done studies on this. It's really wild. They actually did a study where they had people sleep deprived by they were getting 5.5 hours Monday through Friday. And then on the weekend, they were told to sleep 8 hours. So they basically caught up, quote unquote. And then they were asked to self-evaluate Monday and Tuesday. And how did you feel? How do you function? And they always overestimated how well they functioned. They weren't functioning as well as they thought they would. And an analogy that would make sense for a lot of people is the person who's at a bar, okay, and they've had a few drinks. They're like, oh, I'm fine to drive home, right? It's really often the same scenario as people who are sleep deprived chronically, is they feel like I am actually okay to do these things. I'm functioning great. But if you really tested them, they wouldn't be performing as well. So it's that whole line of they may be functioning okay, but they're not really performing at their highest capacity, right? Is what I'm seeing a lot happen with people.
Yeah, that sounds like me.
Yeah.
Because I always thought that I'm fine, I'm getting enough sleep. But ironically, Morgan, you're probably going to be surprised when you hear me say this. Last night was one of the first nights ever that I truly measured my sleep.
Oh,
And I was a bit astonished by what I saw, to be honest with you, because I felt like I had a pretty good sleep. I'll share with you my numbers later and you can tell me if they were good or not. But I think it's one of those things where, again, I think I'm okay, or I thought I was okay, but perhaps I'm not looking deep enough. And I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to ask this question, because that is a gray area for a lot of people, is sleep, which is why
Yeah.
we're talking about it today.
Yeah, it's a very gray area. Yeah, I would definitely like to hear a little bit more later about the numbers and what you uncovered with that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for that. Well,
yeah.
and I think too, I know there's a lot of people that might say that I'm just one of those people that don't need a lot of sleep. I'm a light sleeper, or I've always done this, or they're night owls. They claim themselves to be night owls. And that has a lot to do with our identity when we start claiming this kind of language over ourselves. Have you had clients in the past that have said those things to you? And how have you handled that with them if they said, well, Morgan, I've always been this way? Is that something that you work on their behaviors and their identity with when you are working with them?
Yeah, the identity piece is huge. Most of my clients with insomnia come to me with, I'm a terrible sleeper. I've always been a bad sleeper. My family is bad sleepers. And so they were raised, to have been told as kids, Susie, you're a bad sleeper. So they heard that from an early age that they were bad sleepers. So that becomes part of their identity. And it takes a while to unravel that and to really teach them the behaviors that can turn their sleep around, and so that they are not self-identifying as quote a bad sleeper. Another one, I don't hear this as much from clients, but I hear it just from people that I'm encountering in real life. I'm a night owl. I get my best work done at night. Okay. So there is something called a chronotype. It's a scientifically validated concept. Essentially, we are either an early bird or a night owl, or most of us are somewhere in between. And it's really based on our biology. So the part behind this that's kind of driving it is, supposedly, this is a theory, is that when you're thinking about many, many years ago, when you had people living outside and there were predators and, people who were attacking the tribe, there needed to be full coverage in a daytime, in a 24-hour period, essentially. So the night owls would basically have the purpose of holding the camp safe, right? So there were very few hours that the camp was like unprotected. So that's sort of the biological origin of why they think that people are having these different variances. So it's actually an adaptive feature. And I know a few people who are really legitimately night owls, but here's the twist. We actually see a lot of people who claim they're night owls, but their lifestyle has made them a night owl. And so what that basically means is that they're drinking caffeine late in the day. They are getting very little brightness during the day. They're staying in a dark office all day. And then at night, they're on screens a lot, or they've got bright lights in their home, and they're eating at night. Maybe they're snacking. So their body is kind of like telling them, hey, it's daytime. And I'm like getting stuff done. So my argument, and I think a lot of other people would agree with this, is that if you took a group of self-proclaimed night owls and you kind of retrained them, like they've done studies where they've actually taken people camping for 2 weeks. There was no artificial light. There was no electronics. Basically, people, they went to bed when the sun went down and they got up when the sun rose. And once you had people in that kind of cadence for a couple weeks, most people's circadian rhythm was aligned. So, I mean, there are a couple of outliers, but it's wild to think. And I've met people personally, not clients, but just people that I've encountered who they said, I stopped all those behaviors at night that were, stimulating me, changed a lot of my behaviors. And now I go to bed at 9 or 10 versus midnight, so they weren't naturally night owls. Their lifestyle made them a night owl. So I
Yes,
think that's
I
kind of
can see that.
important.
Yes, especially for, even shift workers and whatnot, like, they have to adapt, they have to make some changes. But I think what you were talking about with the tribe, a lot of that is built into our system, our nervous system. We carry that. It's almost like survival. It's their
Yeah.
survival that's built in. And I could see how that would happen, especially when we're carrying that, like, we got to stay awake so we don't have any danger that we're afraid of.
Yeah.
It's crazy how our brains and our bodies work like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing about our body, I know, and since a lot of listeners are or have been using alcohol as a way to help them go to sleep, and I know when I was drinking, man, alcohol worked. It worked so good for me to fall asleep because I drank until I got to the point where I was so sleepy that I just wanted to go to bed. So while it helped me fall asleep, it certainly didn't help me to stay asleep. And I found myself getting up in the middle of the night, that 2, 3 o'clock wake up, not only using the bathroom, but now my mind is just swirling with all the negativity. Why did I do that? All the guilt and the shame that goes along with that. And then I'm thinking about the next day and all the worry and all the things. So can you share with us why alcohol works to help us fall asleep, but then what really happens to us because of the alcohol?
Yeah. Well, alcohol is actually the most commonly used sleep aid in the world because it does sedate us. It does, have that sedative effect. It makes us sleepy. It's easier to fall asleep, after a few drinks. But we do pay on the back end. You're right. They did a study where they actually measured people's sleep quality after a certain amount of drinks. And even just one drink for a woman decreased sleep quality by 24%. So with each drink, your sleep quality diminishes even further. And so what we often see is waking up in the latter part of the night, maybe hot, maybe sweaty, because it's impacting your blood sugar levels and your cortisol. You may have to go you may have to go to the bathroom. You have to urinate, dehydrating. And you're right. Our brains sort of kind of go in this little spiral. We start to kind of catastrophize even more so than we would if we had not had alcohol. And we basically wake up feeling often like we haven't had a good night of sleep. Even if we've slept 8 hours, we feel like we've gotten, quote, enough sleep, but the quality of our sleep gets really diminished. I know personally, if I've been drinking, I will see my deep sleep on my Oura ring become very low. It's often impacting our REM sleep. A lot of people see that as well. So REM sleep is a really important phase of sleep that it impacts our emotional regulation. So not only do we not have a good night of sleep, but the next day we may be a little bit emotionally labile. Maybe we're in a bad mood so it's definitely not worth it for many people to have alcohol. And yeah, you've experienced it. I've experienced it. I think a lot of people can relate. And, I talked to several people who tell me I have a nightly couple glasses of wine and I wake up at 3 a.m. and they're complaining about waking up at 3 a.m. But the reason why is because they're drinking. It's like sometimes it's a little bit hard to empathize because you're actually creating the wake up. I mean, there are people who I work with who don't drink at all and have those wake ups. And we try to get to the root cause of that. But goodness gracious, if you are waking up at 3 a.m. every night and you're drinking, the first thing to remove as the root cause is the alcohol, as hard as it may be. But it's like it's probably your biggest culprit of waking
Right.
up.
Right. I think for me too is the fear of dementia and Alzheimer's paired with the additional alcohol. And now you're not getting the good quality sleep that you need. You're really putting yourself at risk, especially as we get older. And this is something that is being proven all over. Every day I'm reading something new that is talking about it. And so it is a fear. And I think as we get older, again, us in our 50s, it is a real concern because we're getting to that place of we understand the importance of our brain power for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I want to switch gears a little bit, Morgan, because this might be a little on the personal side. And I say that with so much love in my heart for my husband, but he is somebody who snores. And I know that there are other couples out there that are experiencing some of the things that we have experienced, which is when one partner isn't getting the quality sleep that they need because of their partner who does have some sleep apnea or some sort of, even when we're sick, we have a hard time with that. Do you have any great first places to start? Like, what is step one for a couple? What are some things that they can start to look at? Where would you suggest they start?
Yeah, I think that this is so common. I have seen like so many clients dealing with the same scenario. Really, the first step that I suggest is that spouse who's snoring to have a sleep study. And these days, it's actually really easy to get one. You can just order one online and have it shipped to your house because we really want to rule out sleep apnea. I mean, not every single person who snores has apnea, but quite a few do. So that's really the first step, is to like deal with the actual snoring, because it's not only disrupting the other partner, but it's also potentially impacting the snorer's health if they do have apnea that's untreated. So that's first step. Second step is trying to figure out some kind of win-win solution as far as how can the non-snoring partner sleep. So that could be a variety of different tactics. It could be having some kind of, earplugs, white noise. If that doesn't work sometimes, and I've seen this happen many, many times in my practice, is that people will have a temporary, and I don't like this word, but it's a temporary sleep divorce. And that basically means, sleeping in separate bedrooms until the issue is resolved. One really, really impactful, useful book that I recommend to people who are dealing with this situation is a book called Sharing the Covers by Dr. Wendy Troxel. She goes very deep into this whole topic. And one of the points that she makes that makes a lot of sense to me, because I actually in a previous marriage struggled with this issue while I had insomnia. My former husband was snoring. I did not know then what I know now. And I didn't, react to it as maturely as I would now, admittedly. But things get heated when the other partner is not getting the sleep they need. And sometimes it ends up being like a blame game. I didn't get enough sleep because of you snoring. There's a lot of finger pointing, right? So that never works out for either party. So Wendy Troxel in her book makes such a really great point of having this discussion where the situation is framed as we have a shared concern and let's solve this problem together so that it's a win-win. An alliance kind of mentality versus an adversarial. I think that a lot of people fall into that adversarial mentality, and it creates a lot more conflict in the relationship than it should.
Yes, I love that. And one more time, can you tell us the name of that book?
Yes, Sharing the Covers by Wendy Troxel. It's a great book. The book is all about it's not just about snoring. It goes also into new parenthood and how to kind of negotiate, sleeping when there's a newborn or whatever, basically how to sleep as a couple and have good sleep.
So Morgan, I have another question that I think might sting a little bit for those that think that they are getting some good sleep with some of their tools, but it might actually be making it worse. What do you think some of those gadgets or tools are that it's a two-part question. What do you think the biggest culprits are that are actually making it worse? And then what are those gadgets and tools that we cannot live without them? They're so valuable. You should consider implementing these tools if you want to work on your sleep quality.
Yeah. One of the tools that's very commonly in people's bedrooms is a TV. Now, I watch TV before bed with my husband, but we watch it in a different room. We don't have a TV in our bedroom. I think that the main issue is that people going to sleep with a TV, it can really impact your sleep because they're random sounds that happen while you're asleep from the TV that can actually create these micro awakenings. So it's one of those things that I think can sometimes cause tension with couples, because I've worked with people where one person wanted the TV for background noise and the other one didn't. So I think that's something that should be, addressed. Maybe sleep with a timer on your TV to make it go off, at a certain time so that it's not running all night. As far as tools that help, I personally am in love with cooling mattress pads.
Mm-hmm.
I have been using one for like 4 years at least. The one that I use is called 8 Sleep.
8 Sleep.
And it has a built-in sleep tracker in it. But that has been the most impactful sleep tool because having, being in midlife, going through that transition, I'm a hotter sleeper than I had been before. And so this cooling mattress pad helps mitigate the I don't want to say hot flashes because I haven't had those, but it keeps my temperature, in a place where I'm not woken up frequently during the night. They are an investment. I will be upfront, but they are game changing. Other tools, I would say a pair of really good noise canceling earbuds. I use a brand called Oslo, Ozlo, and you can use their app to have their sleep sounds, their music or whatever, or you could actually choose your own music or whatever you want to listen to. But I have found that to be personally very useful because I'm a light sleeper. And so random noises will wake me up pretty easily. So having those in my ears keeps things, kind of soundproof so that I don't hear the random noises. And I think another sleep tool that I use before bed, which is really helpful for down regulating the nervous system, it's called the Moonbird Breathwork Coach. It's a little handheld device. It's about the size of a chicken breast. Is it the best size I could, convey to you? Is you hold it in your hands and it helps you do paced breathing exercises. It comes with an app. You can use the app to kind of have the app count down, or you can use it without the app. And it helps you just kind of downshift before bed. I really like to do that before bed. So those are my go-to tools. I love tools, I do, but I don't want to become overly reliant on too many. And I encourage my clients not to as well, because we do have the ability to have good sleep without a lot of these extraneous things. I think sometimes we can overdo it and it can get too complicated. So those are pretty much the main ones that I use. And of course, I experiment with some from time to time because companies will send them to me and they'll want feedback. But I try not to get too fancy with like overloading.
The other risk with that is when you're traveling, you can't take your
Yes.
cooling mattress with you. You can take the Oslos with you, but and maybe what did you call that again? That looks like
The
a little
Moonbird.
mood bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
The
love,
Moonbird.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you're able to.
You're exactly right, Carrie, because when we go out of town, I don't sleep as well because I'm used to the cool mattress. So the AC has to be blasted. But that is the only downside that, I can foresee is just you don't have those things with you when you travel often. And so traveling may not be as enticing at times, depending on where you're going.
Yes, this is all very true. I read somewhere, about grounding, right?
Yeah.
Earthing.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you believe that that's true, that when we travel and we cross over to different time zones, especially if we're in the United States and we travel to Europe, for example, that if we get our feet in sand or water or in the soil, that we're able to regulate our bodies to that time change, that it's not so much of a difference for us in our bodies. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a really useful free tool that we all have access to. It's just if you don't have sand or a beach, you can find a little patch of grass wherever you land and try to ground after a flight. I think that's a really helpful tool. I will say that when I do go to the beach, I will notice that my heart rate variability is higher. I feel like my nervous system is more regulated with that constant grounding in the sand, but not every vacation is a beach vacation,
That's right. That's right.
unfortunately for me.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Morgan, you mentioned so many great tools and so many things that we can consider. And I think I remember seeing on your website, it's morganadamswellness.com. Is that correct?
That's right.
You have quite a few products that you have reviewed that you personally recommend. So if what we suggested today or what Morgan brought up, you can go to her website and find those exact tools and methods that she discussed.
Yes, and there's usually a little discount link and
Yes.
code as well to help sweeten the deal for people because these tools can add up and every little bit helps.
Yes. And I will say, I've taken you up on one of your suggestions, which was the Cozy Earth sheets, the bamboo
My,
sheet.
Mm-hmm,
They are
yes.
so lovely. They truly are cooling sheets. So there are a lot of great products on her site. So please go check it out. And I want to ask one final question for you, Morgan, that is so apropos, I think, for um, this podcast is particularly, which is all about the gray areas that we have. So my last question is, what is one gray area around sleep that people tolerate way too long, and what does it end up costing them in the end?
Ooh, I think that one gray area is probably inconsistent sleep patterns, inconsistent sleep-wake cycles. People who are going to bed and waking up at just varying random times. It seems very innocuous, right? Because they're like, well, as long as I get my 8 hours, it doesn't matter when during the night I get it. But actually, that is sort of old thinking because we have new data as of the last few years showing that when we can really dial in our sleep wake times by like an hour, we have better mortality rates and lower cardiometabolic risk rates. So if you are somebody who's going to bed at 9, then going to bed at midnight the next night, then going to bed at 10 the night after that, what you really want to try to do is keep those sleep wake times pretty dialed in, usually 30 to 60 minutes. And it's really a game changer in people's sleep quality. I know it sounds so simplistic, but just getting the 8 hours whenever you can get it doesn't always cut it for most people.
Right. It sounds like consistency is the main.
Consistency for the win.
Yes,
100%.
absolutely. Oh my gosh. We could talk for hours and hours, and I think the listeners probably feel that same way. And I appreciate you being so generous with everything that you know and that you share so openly. So if people do want to learn more about you, can you share? I already gave your website, morganadamswellness.com, but where can they find you on social? I know you're on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Is that the best place?
Yeah, those are both great. I'm kind of scaling back on LinkedIn right now, but I'm more active on Instagram. And that handle is morganadams.wellness. And
Okay.
I offer an opportunity for a consultation as well on my website. And actually, as well as a free guide for anybody who is dealing with frequent 3 a.m. wake ups. So there's a free resource on my website to check out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go grab that
Yeah.
resource because I know a lot of people are still struggling with those 3 o'clock wake up calls, and it's so maddening when it happens. So that'll be great. Well, if you've been listening and something has stirred inside you today and you are now questioning, am I doing the right things for my sleep? Or am I in a gray area with your sleep? Please do not let this pass by without taking some sort of action. Whether it's the alcohol piece that we talked about or this realization that you've been tolerating something that you don't have to tolerate it anymore, please consider doing something with it. The show isn't just to provide information, it's to provide you with some sort of action. And remember, there is life beyond the gray, and sometimes, and a lot of times, it starts with a better night's sleep. Thank you, Morgan, for being here, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time.